We begin today the Gemara on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, 3 lines up from the bottom of the Yamud, Leme Ketanoi. The Gemara before brought a statement from Rabbi Yehuda Bereid Rab Chia and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi regarding the halacha by achatos pnimis, where the Torah clearly writes that the way the spraying of the blood in Mizbeach is done, the kohen has to be toivel etz boy badam. He dips his finger into the blood, and with the finger he sprays it on the Mizbeach. So the question is, if that act of being toivel etz boy badam is an aveda, that if you have the machshava of pigul, which means that you're going to eat, or the Mizbeach will eat from this carbon, shaloi bizmane, not in its right time, is this kind of aveda, just as dipping the finger into the blood, significant enough that a machshava there would passel? So they both said that it is, and the machshava at that time will be mefagel the carbon. Says the Gemara, Leimek Tanoi, shall we say that this halacha is a machlekes Tanoim? Because the Tani Chode, in one brayse it says, Tfilas etzba mefageles bechatos. The dipping of the finger into the blood can cause pigul by the chatos. But the Tanya Yidach, in another brayse it says, Loi mefageles, it cannot cause any pigul. And that is if he dips his finger into the blood and he's thinking the thought that he'll be makter de murim, that he'll burn the parts of the carbon tomorrow, out of its time. So that machshava then will not cause pigul. And also veloy mispageles, which means if he shechts the carbon and he thinks then that I'm going to dip my finger into the blood, not on its time, tomorrow, that also will not cause any pigul, because this is not a significant aveda to cause pigul. Sorry. Okay, so we clearly see here machlekes tanoim regarding the subject. So my love tanoi, don't you think that right here this is a machlekes tanoim? And says the Gemara, loy, it's not a machlekes, because ha rabbanon and ha Rab Shimon. The two brises here are two different opinions, Rabbanon and Rab Shimon. This is the Rab Shimon that the Gemara brought before in the Mishnah, or that we had in the Mishnah, that says that Bechlal, regarding Haylacha, that stage of delivering the blood to the Mizbeach, since it's in a carbon, or it's a Aveda rather, that does not have to be done, the machshava of pigul during the Haylacha is not going to be mefagel the carbon. So similar, Rab Shimon would hold regarding the tefillah of the etzba, the finger into the blood. The Gemara before said that there's the svara to say that that is part of the halacha. It's a stage in bringing it to the mizbeach. So according to Rab Shimon, just like halacha itself will not be pigul, the tefillah etzba badam will also not be pigul. But according to the Rabbanon, it will be, because by halacha they say the halacha of pigul applies. That's the explanation of these two brises.
Why isn't that a machlekes tanoim?
It's because the machlekes, the Gemara was suggesting to say, is according to the opinion that says, which is the Rabbanon, that halacha is something that can cause pigul. But the question is, even according to the Rabbanon, shall we say that the dipping of the finger is not significant enough? So the Gemara wanted to say that this itself, whether the dipping of the finger is significant enough, is a machlekes tanoim. Says the Gemara, no, it's not. It's based on another machlekes regarding the halacha. Since Rab Shimon holds that the entire halacha is insignificant, so therefore the dipping of the finger into the blood is included in the halacha, and it's not significant as well. But it's not a separate machlekes regarding the finger. The truth is that the Rishonim point out that over here in the Shittim Mekabet says that the dipping of the finger is actually a necessary stage that must be done, because it says it in the pasuk. Halacha, Rab Shimon says, since it's something that does not have to be done, there's no pigul there. But nevertheless, the Gemara connects it. The Gemara says that the tefillah of etzba badam is a stage of bringing it closer to the Mizbeach, and according to Rab Shimon, if there's no pigul by halacha, there's no pigul by sticking the finger into the blood as well. Says the Gemara, Bari Rab Shimon, if this brayse here is Rab Shimon, my area tefillah etzba. Why would it say that only regarding the dipping of the finger into the blood that there's no pigul for? But ha'amar, Rab Shimon's opinion later in the Masechta is Kol she'enoi al mizbeach hachitzin k'shlamim. Any carbon with which the blood is not sprayed on the outside mizbeach, like the shlamim, where the Torah writes the halacha of pigul, ein by mishum pigul. There's no halacha of pigul regarding such a carbon. So over here we're talking about the chatas that's brought inside. So there should be no din of pigul at all, according to Rab Shimon. Not only regarding this blood, or dipping the finger into the blood. Says the Gemara, so elos, or rather, ha v'ha rabbanon. Both of these brises is according to the Rabbanon, but there's no contradiction here. We don't have to say that there's a machlekes regarding the dipping of the finger into the blood. Everybody would agree that that is pigul. But here, the answer for these two brises is kan b'chatois sachitzainis. If it's a chatos, that is, the blood is being sprayed on the outside Mizbeach. So over there is no pigul for this. Because by the blood on the outside Mizbeach, it does not say, the Gemara will explain. Let's see. By the other brisa, where it says that there is pigul, it's by the chatos that the blood is sprayed on the inside Mizbeach. What's the difference? Chatos achitzayni is, the Gemara asks right away, but the point is that the outside Mizbeach, it never says in the pasuk clearly this expression, v'toval, that you should dip your fingers into the blood. It says a different lashon in the pasuk. It says v'lokach hakayim midam achatos be'etz boy. It doesn't say with the finger, so it's pretty clear that it has to be done with the finger. But nevertheless, it doesn't explicitly say the term v'toval. Whereas by the chatos apnimis, the Torah explicitly says this term of v'toval. Therefore, the dipping of the finger in the blood is significant that the din of pigul would apply there. So the Gemara asks, chatos achitzaynius, the chatos that's spread on the outside mizbeach pshita. It's obvious because the pasuk that does not use it looks like siv b'hu v'tovel, doesn't use the actual term v'tovel. So as I mentioned, although it is necessary to dip the finger there because it does say in the pasuk it's boy, but it doesn't say the term v'tovel. It says v'lokach, and the Gemara actually later in the Masechta says that when it says the term v'lokach means the receiving of the blood into the keli, and you're supposed to divide the pasuk into two. V'lokach hakoyin, he receives the blood. And then midam achatas be'etz boy, he has to dip his finger into the blood, and with that to spray in the mizbeach. But it doesn't say v'toval clearly. So if so, it should be obvious that it's not significant that the machshava of pigul should be mefagel the carbon. Says the Gemara, no, but nevertheless it's necessary for the brisa to say regarding the chatas chitzainis that it should be that will not become pasul or become pigul with this machshava. Because I would think to say, it does say in the pasuk the term velokach. So it doesn't say clearly v'tovel, it only says velokach. And as I mentioned, that means that you have to receive the blood, and then later the pasuk says, with your finger, you spray in the mizbeach. But now, the halacha here is, if a monkey would come and take from the blood and place it into the kohen's hands or on his finger, he would have to go and take the blood and dip his finger into the blood a second time. So it actually does have to be done with the finger of the kohen, not through some other kind of way. So therefore, command d'chsev v'toval dami. It's as if the Torah actually wrote the word v'toval, even though it doesn't explicitly write it. So kamash malon. So this is the chiddush of this brayse that lahachi l'chsev v'toval. Reason why it doesn't say the actual word v'toval, the mashma hachi or mashma hachi. So now it sounds like the pasuk is saying that you don't even have to dip your finger inside at all. On the other hand, it says bed's boy. So it sounds like you do have to stick your finger inside. What does it mean? That this avodah of dipping the finger inside does have to be done, but it does not write it explicitly, so that you should know that the halacha of the machshava of pigul will not apply to it. It's not significant enough because the Torah did not write it explicitly, so the halacha of pigul is not applicable here. Okay, now we go back to the Mishnah where it quotes this opinion of Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon machshir behiloch. Rab Shimon says the avodas that of the carbon that will passel the carbon with a machshava shalei lishma, but it does not include delivering the blood to the mizbeach. Amar Rab Shimon ben Lakish. Rab Shimon ben Lakish says, Maide Rab Shimon. However, Rab Shimon will agree by lochas chatois apnimius, when you have to deliver the blood into the inside mizbeach or inside the heichal where you spray the blood. Shemachshava pisalis bohu. There, the machshava in delivering the blood inside will passel the carbon. Since this is an aveda that you cannot do without, you shech the carbon outside, and Rashi here says an interesting lashon. It's lav oirech ara. It's not the right thing to shech the carbon inside the Beis Hamikdash. So you shecht it outside, and then you must bring the blood inside. So you can't do without this. So the machshava for this halacha will passel even according to Rab Shimon. But the Gemara asks from the opinion of Rab Shimon that we quoted before. But Rab Shimon said, any carbon that the blood is not sprayed on the outside mizbech, like the shlomim, which is the source for the halacha of pigul, ein chayav olav mishum pigul. There is no chiyuv of pigul here, so the machshava of pigul b'chlal is not applicable here. So the Gemara now understands that when it says over here in the Mishnah, Rab Shimon machshir behiluch, and then the Rab Shimon ben Lakish that says that he's maide by chatois apnimis, we're talking about pigul, and therefore Rab Shimon b'chlal holds there's no pigul regarding the blood that's brought inside. Answers the Gemara, Rab Yosef Rab Chanina, Maide Haya. Rab Shimon would agree, lifsoil mikavachimer, that true, there's no halacha of actual pigul, which would mean that the carbon gets a status of pigul, and that as a result, if you eat from this carbon, you'd be chayav kodesh. Yeah, that take Rab Shimon holds will not apply here. However, he would be maided that it will become pasul mikavachimer, because we have a kavachimer to pasul this. As the Gemara will explain how the kavachimer, but just to point out, Rashi here says the Gemara could have simply answered that the Mishnah is not even talking about pigul altogether. It's talking b'chlal about a machshava shaloi lishma, that it will apply for halacha when you're bringing the blood inside. We're not discussing pigul. But the Gemara wanted to say a chiddush that even regarding pigul, it is applicable according to Rab Shimon, not that it should be actual pigul, but for a psul. What's the kavachimer he said? If regarding the kavan of shaloi lishma, when you think shaloi lishma by a shlamim, it's still kosher. But paisel b'chatos, but this shaloi lishma regarding a chatos is different, and over here it will be pasul as we learned before. So chutz lizmanoi shepaisel b'shlamim. So the machshava of pigul that you will eat out of its time that pasels by the shlamim as well. Most definitely, it should cause a psul for the chatos, but not more than a psul though, because the kavachimer is based on the shaloi lishma, which is only a psul. So we can't apply more than that psul of the shaloi lishma regarding the shaloi bizmanoi in this case. Okay, so that's the kavachimer that we learn out for the chatois apnimius, that it won't be pigul, but it will be pasul. Okay, so Mana, the Gemara says there's other kinds of machshavas that could passel as well. How would we know that this applies by the chatas that's brought inside? So va'ashkacha chutz lezmanai. So we have this kavachimer regarding when he had the machshava of chutz lezmanai that we learn from this kavachimer from shalei lishma. Chutz lemekaymai min alon. How do I know that the same would apply if you have a machshava regarding the chatas brought inside and the machshava was chutz lemekaymai? And it also says this originally in the Torah. Chutz l'mekaymai, it says it by shlamim, which is blood sprayed on the outside mizbeach. So how do we know that this psul of chutz l'mekaymai would apply to the chatas that's brought inside as well? Says the Gemara, now imi chutz l'zmanai, if you would just want to compare it to what we just said, that chutz l'zmanai, we learned out from a kavachimer, that the machshava that will eat it outside of the right time, that it's going to be pasul. So the same should be if he has a machshava to eat it out of the right place. You can't compare, because mal chutz lezmanoi sheken kodesh. This machshava of chutz lezmanoi usually causes pigul, that there's kodesh for this. So you can learn out from this to shalei b'mkaimi, where there is never any kodesh for this kind of machshava. Now, if you want to learn out a kavachimer, similar to what we said before, the kavachimer from shalei lishma to chutz lezmanoi. Now let's make the same kavachimer for chutz l'mekaimi, but that won't work either, because shekain noyeg bebame. Because the halacha of shalei lishma is something which is applicable when a carbon was brought on a bama. In the time when it was allowed to bring a carbon on a private mizbeach, not in the Beis Hamikdash, the psul of shalei lishma applies there. But this psul shalei b'mkaimai does not apply there. Because when you're bringing a carbon on a bama, which is not in the place by the Beis Hamikdash, and the entire world is the makim where you can eat that carbon. So therefore, you can't learn out shalei b'mkaimai from shalei lishma. Shalei lishma has a unique stringency. Okay, so but the Gemara now says, though, no, it's not considered to be a stringency. Why not? Because shalei lishma b'may noyeg. Where do I find that a machshava shalei lishma actually completely passes the carbon? That's only by Pesach v'chatos. Only by two karbanos, as the first Mishnah says, only by the Pesach and the chatos. Pesach v'chatos b'bama le'karban. Both the Pesach and Chatas are karbanis that cannot be brought on a private bama. Only karbanis that a person can donate privately, a neder or a nedaveh, could be brought on a bama, not the Pesach or the Chatas. So therefore, this stringency that it applies to a bama does not apply over here by this shalei lishma specifically that we're talking about over here regarding the Pesach and the Chatas. And therefore, we could learn out the kavachimer from shalei lishma to the psul of shaloi b'mkaimai, that it should apply to the chatas hapnimis as well. That's one answer. Or you could say hekeshahu. There's a hekesh in the pasuk, so there's no percha on this, because the Torah clearly compares two in the same pasuk, and that's the shaloi b'zmanai and shaloi b'mkaimai are compared. Because when it says in the pasuk the halacha of pigul, the pasuk there says shlishi. That's v'mhei achal ya'achal mepsar zevach shlomim bayayim hashlishi. So that when it says shlishi means that he had the machshava that he would spray the blood or he would eat it on the third day. That part of the pasuk is speaking about pigul, not in its right time. Pigul. That's chutz l'zmana. That's the word shlishi. That means chutz l'zmana. Then when the pasuk adds pigul, the actual term of the Torah itself, when it uses the word pigul, it doesn't mean what we call pigul, chutz l'zmana, like it says before shlishi. Pigul means chutz l'mekaymai, that he had a machshava that'll eat it not in the right place, and therefore the Torah says the two together. So wherever there's the halacha of pigul, and we already learned from the Zevochim that pigul applies to the chatas apnimis, even if it's not going to be totally pigul, but it's going to be pasul, it applies equally to chutz l'mekaymai. Dr. Gemara, going back now to explaining Rab Shimon's opinion that only a hiluch, delivering blood, which is a necessity, you can't do without, there the machshava shalei l'shma will passel. So Rava says, Omar Rava, and Timtzaloi ma Rab Shimon savala kiberei. If you're going to say that Rab Shimon holds like his the opinion of his son Rabbi Lazar, the Omar, he said, Bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach tzafin, that between the ulam and the mizbeach is also considered to be the north of the mizbeach. So the Mizbeach is positioned, according to this opinion, in the middle of the Azara. Half of the Mizbeach, the part of the Mizbeach is in front of the Ulam. The tzafin of the Mizbeach is right at the center of the entrance of the Ulam. Okay, so when you have to shecht kachim on the north of the Mizbeach, you could shecht it on the north of the Mizbeach, which is not right near the doorway, entering into the antechamber, into the Ulam that then goes into the Heichal. Or you could shecht it tzafin of the Mizbeach, but further up, right near the entrance into the Ulam. So Rabbi Lazar says that area, even though it's not mamish north of the Mizbeach, but it is considered to be north of the Mizbeach. So if so, you could technically shech the carbon right by the door entering into the Ulam. If so, ein machshava mayeles by lachas chatoyes apnimius. So the machshava shalei lishma will not have any effect when you're delivering the blood of the chatas that has to be brought inside. Ela mi pesach ulam v'lifnim. Only from the entrance of the ulam going inside, because you can't shecht inside, but you could shecht right outside. So any area that if you shecht it further away is not necessary. So only from the door where there's the closest you could shecht, going inside to the heichal, that's the area where if you have a machshava shalei lishma, it will passel. Now another halacha the Gemara explains according to Rab Shimon, and this is regarding the lechem apanim. By lechem apanim, there's also a concept of pigul. How? Because in order for the Kainim to eat from the lechem apanim, there was shnei beziche levaina, frankincense, that was on the table, on the shulchan, that had to be brought out onto the mizbeach, and it had to be burnt on the mizbeach. Only after that's burned is it matter, is it allowed to eat from the breads. The halacha of pigul applies by anything where there's a matter. Anytime you have to do something to be matter, the eating of it, if you have a machshava to eat it, shaloi bizmanoi, it's going to passel this. Okay, so now regarding the lechem apanim, if Rav Shimon agrees to what Rav Yehuda said, what did he say? Any place that's between the Mizbeach and the Ulam, the Beis HaMikdash, that whole area of the Azara was completely sanctified like the Mizbeach itself, and you could bring a carbon, you could burn a carbon anywhere in that space of the Azara. It's based on a pasuk where it says that the place was sanctified. And Rabbi Yehuda says it means literally that it was sanctified to bring any carbon over there in that place. Rashi brings the pasuk. So if that's the case, you could bring a carbon anywhere in that place. So now when you're removing the frankincense of the shulchan inside the Beis HaMikdash, you're bringing it out. So where is an area where it's necessary to deliver it and where is not? So where is the machshava of the person going to be effective when he's bringing this bezichen to make pigul? Ela mi pesach heichal v'lachutz. Only from the opening of the heichal going out into the ulam. So there's that area of a ulam, antechamber, which is in front of the heichal. So it's in that area where he has to walk to deliver. Inside the heichal, it's not necessary to walk, because technically the shulchan and the lechem apanim can be anywhere inside the heichal, as close to the doorway of the heichal as possible. When you walk right outside the ulam, you have the azara, according to Rabbi Yehuda, any space in that area of the azara, you can already burn the frankincense right there. So it's only that ulam where it's necessary to walk and deliver it that the machshava of pigul will take effect. Furthermore, Vimtim Tzalaima, if you're going to say that Sava, that Rab Shimon would hold, Kedushas Heichel Ulam Chadehi, that these two areas, the Heichel and the Ulam, are really the same Kedusha, so you can really have the bread even all the way up to the doorway of the Ulam. So Ein Machshava Mayeles Elam Pesach Ulam Velachutz. So then the only tiny area where there'll be necessary to deliver it, and there'll be a halacha of pigel that will passel the carbon, is only the thickness of the wall of the ulam, which was 5 amos thick. That area that you have to walk, that's the area where there could be a halacha of pigel. Now, furthermore, if you're going to say that that thickness of the entrance, the doorway, has a halacha like the inside, so therefore you can have the breads even within the doorway itself. So the machshava of the person will not have any effect to passel this, even for that one step over there. But to stretch out his hand without walking, but stretching out the hand to deliver the bread from inside to outside to burn, and it can be burnt according to Rabbi Yehuda right outside in the Azara, only that act will be something that could be mefagel this bezichen and passel the bread. Furthermore, if you're going to say that Savar, that Rav Shimon holds, and the Gemara will discuss this soon, that anything that's delivered, but it's not by moving your feet and actually changing your position by walking, that's not significant of a halacha, that it would be mefagel, it's not an aveda that could cause pigel. So in this case, there is no machshava for any halacha that would be mefagel the carbon, according to Rav Shimon, that says that anything you can do without, there's no halacha of pigel. Talk to Gemara, Amalei Abaye, or others say Rav Sheishes La Amoire, the Rav Chisda. He said to the interpreter of Rav Chisda, by my name Rav Chisda, ask Rav Chisda the following shaila: Halacha bizar mahu. The halacha of delivering, halacha, bringing the blood to the mizbeach. Could that be done by a non-kayin as well? So the shechita we know does not have to be done by a kayin, but receiving the blood we had before the pasuk, it clearly says it has to be done by a kayin, wearing the garments. But what's with the halacha? This is an aveda that does not have to be done. So does it have to be done by a kohen? Amalek Sheira. Rav Chisda said that it's kosher even without a kohen, because umikra misayeni. There's a pasuk that proves my point, because it says vayishchetu es Pesach, they shechted the carbon Pesach, vayizruku hakohenim es adam mi yadam, and the kohenim went and sprayed the blood that they took from their hands. Whose hands did they take it from? They took it from the hands of the one that the pasuk mentions before, the ones that shechted. Who shechted? Not necessarily a kohen, because the shechita could be done by azar, by anybody. And then it says, Valaviyim afshitim. The Levim would skin the animal. So you clearly see that the ones that delivered the blood to the kohenim was a zar. Most of Rav Sheishes asked, but there's a clear price that says not so. A zar, a non-kohen, a oinon, one that a close relative passed away and was not buried yet on that day. Shikir, a person that's intoxicated, in the lashon of the pasuk, shesuya yayin, or balmum, a kohen with a blemish. The Kabbalah, Bahilache, Bezrike, whether receiving the blood or delivering the blood or spraying the blood, pasul. It'll all be pasul. And v'chein yoshev, so too if he's sitting, and v'chein smile, and so too if he's doing the aveda with the left hand. So to Yufta, this refutes what Rav Chisda said. It clearly says that even the hilacha will be pasul as well with a zar. But the Gemara asks, but for Rav Chisda kra ka'ama, Rav Chisda brought a pasuk in Divrei Yamim that indicates that a Yisrael had delivered the blood to the kohen to spray on the mizbeach. So how can we say that a kohen must always do this? And says the Gemara, the Aved Maise Itztebe. In that case, the Yisrael that had the blood in his hands and the kohen took it from him, he didn't walk, he didn't deliver it. He was standing in his place. They shechted the carbon Pesach, and the Yisrael there just held the blood in his hands in his place, without moving, like a bench that's holding something. And then the kohen came and took it from him and sprayed it on the mizbeach. That's what it means. Rabbi and Rav Yosef both said about this shaila regarding the halacha, whether it could be done by a zar. Halacha bezar machlekes Rav Shimon v'Rabbanan. This halacha is based on the same argument that we brought before between Rav Shimon and Rabbanan regarding the halacha, whether the psul shaloi l'shma applies there or not. And the Gemara explains that Rav Shimon damar aveda she'ef shalavatla lav avedahi. Rav Shimon that says that any aveda that you could do without, so it's not a significant aveda, that the machshava shaloi l'shma would passel it, suksheira bizar. So the aveda is going to be kosher with azar as well. These two things go hand in hand. L'Rabbanan psula. However, according to Rabbanan, since he says that halacha is a significant aveda, and the machshava will passel it, so too a non-kayin cannot do this aveda. It will passel the aveda of halacha as well. Amalei Abaye, but Abaye asks on this comparison that Rabbi and Rav Yosef say that these two things are connected to each other. But vashchita, the aveda sheyav shelavatla, shchita, slaughtering the animal, is an aveda that you cannot do without. V'ksheira bizar, and nevertheless it is kosher to be done by a non-kayin. So we see that these two things are not necessarily connected to each other. Amalei, so Rabbi and Rav Yosef answered, shchita lav avedahi. Shchita is not considered to be, we don't find anywhere in the Torah, in any scenario, that shchita is an aveda. It can always be done by a zar, and therefore you can't prove anything from the shchita. And that's how Rashi explains this. Tosfos over here asks, it's this itself that we're discussing over here. Whether since shchita is an aveda that you cannot do without, whether maybe that itself is a reason why the kohen must do it. But from Rashi it's mashma that he's saying, any type of shchita in connection to any kachim in any circumstance, we never find in the Torah that it speaks about this as an aveda that a kohen has to do. So therefore, it's a different category. It's not an aveda. Fragt the Gemara, v'loi, isn't there a case? But v'amar abseira amarav shchitas para bezar psula, when you shecht a para aduma, if it's done by a zar, it'll be puzzle. And what's the reason for this? Because v'amar rav alo, Rav Papa says about this, because it says by the para aduma elazar, that had done by a lazar a kayin, and the chukah. It also uses the term chukah. Whenever it says the term chukah ksiv ba, it means that it's ma'akiv. It must be done by a kayin. So you see that there is a shchita. It doesn't say anywhere else, but there is one shchita you find by the paraduma that it must be done by a kayin. So how can you say that we never find it to be like a regular aveda? As the Gemara, you can't learn from the paraduma, because shani para de kachi bedek abayisi. Paraduma is not a regular carbon that has the kedushas aguf that's brought in the mizbeach. It's like something that's owned monetarily by the bedek abayis. So therefore, the status of what happens there, the shchita done by a lazar, by a kayin, you can't compare and learn out to regular shchita. But why can't you learn out from there? Can't you say that it should even more so be by a regular carbon? If he's saying even by Kodesh Bedek Habayis, it's not a full-fledged carbon. So the Shechita is a significant Aveda that it must be done through a Kayin. Kodesh Mizbeach, Lav Avedi. And you're saying that Kodesh Mizbeach is not going to be considered an Aveda? It is an Aveda. It's a necessary step, and it can be framed as an Aveda. And still the Torah says that it's an Aveda and the Machshava Shalei Lishma will passel for it, but on the other hand, it does not have to be done by a Kayin. So we see these 2 points are not necessarily connected one to another, like Rabbi and Rav Yosef said. So Amar Rav Sheshe Bereider Ravidi says, no, we can't make this Kal V'chaimer, and I'll bring you another example. Midi Dehave Amaris Negoyim. The example is the fact that a Kayin is the only one that could look at the colors of a nega to determine if it's Tameh or not. Now, this Indian of the lav avedahi, it's definitely not an aveda of a carbon, but ubaye kohana, that's something that does require that it should be done only by a kayin. So therefore, the fact that it requires to be done only by a kayin does not prove that it's an aveda. So we can't prove anything from the shchita of para aduma, which is not regular kachim brought on the mizbeach. Bringing the pieces of the animal, of the carbon, to the ramp, which is a kind of aveda that it could be done without. You can just have the whole animal to get as one piece put there by the kevesh, and without all the pieces, the way it's described. So it could be done without this. But upsula bizarre, nevertheless, it must be done through a kayin. Who's the one that brings the pieces of the carbon? The kayin, it says. And then it's burnt on the mizbeach. When it says vehikriv, it means bringing the pieces to the ramp of the mizbeach. So I clearly see that it could be something which is must be done by the kayin, even though it's a kind of aveda that you could do without. So we can't say the svara that Rabbi and Rav Yosef said before, that these 2 things are dependent one on another. But the Gemara says it's not a question, because here there's a clear pasuk. Heiche de gali, gali. Veheiche de loy gali, loy gali. Where the Torah says it clearly that it must be done by a kayin, so then the Torah says so clearly. But if it doesn't say so clearly, it does not have to be done by a kayin if it's a kind of aveda that you could do without it. So therefore we can't learn from this. But the Gemara asks, why not? V'lav kol dekenu. Why shouldn't we learn with a kal v'chayim from here? When it comes to delivering the pieces of the animal to the ramp, which is not something that holds up the actual atonement of the carbon. That's done by the spraying of the blood. But nevertheless, by kahuna here, the Torah says it requires to be done by the kayin, halachas dam, the ma'akva kapara. So delivering the blood to spray on the mizbeach, which is a necessary step because we still don't have the kapara. It holds back the kapara that happens only when you spray the blood, like kol shekain. Definitely, it should be done by the kayin. And another point the Gemara says, it menami. We also learned that Oma Ola Omar Abelazar Haylache Bizar Psula Afilu Rab Shimon. Delivering the blood to the mizbeach will be possible if it's done by a zar, and that's even according to Rab Shimon that says that's because it doesn't always have to be done, so the machshava of Shalei Lishma will not passel this. But as far as a non-kohen doing this, everybody agrees, even Rab Shimon agrees that it will be passel. That's the conclusion. Now the Gemara brings up the Ibaya regarding the detail mentioned before. Ibaya Luhu, the Shaila was asked, Haylache Shalei Beregel. When you're delivering something, you're stretching out your hand to deliver, but you're not doing it walking by foot. Shma Haylache, is this significant enough to be a delivery that the Machshava Shalei Lishma will passel this, and it must be done only by a Kayin? Oi, Lo Shma Haylache. Delivering by hand without walking is not significant as a Haylache, and those halachas do not apply. Toshama, let's bring a raya from a lashon of the Brais that we mentioned here in the beginning of the Amud. It said, "V'chein yoshev v'chein smile pasel." Kayin sitting or doing the avodah with his left hand will be pasel. So now, what does it sound like? The problem is only the fact that he's sitting. But ha'omed dum yedi yoshev. But if he does an avodah standing, even if it's similar to sitting, which means he's not really budging from his place. So he's doing an avodah standing where he's delivering something, but he's not walking with his feet. Kosher. That's a valid avodah. And therefore, the halacha does not necessarily have to be by him walking with his feet. Says the Gemara, not necessarily. Dilma Yoshev, the Kashayif Meshav, maybe when it says sitting, there has to be movement of his body, but he's like sort of dragging himself on the floor, sitting. And Aymed, Dum Yedi Yoshev, the night porta, and therefore he has to be standing, but it has to be similar to what we just described with sitting, and that is that he's moving at least a little. Only then will the Aveda be valid. Toshama, the Gemara tries to bring another eye from what it says by the carbon Pesach. Shachat Yisrael, a Yid shechts the carbon, the Kibbutz Kayin, and then the Kayin receives the blood, and this Kayin himself seemingly does not move from his place. He gives the bowl of the blood to his friend right near him. And then there's a whole lineup of a row of a kainim that goes all the way to the mizbech, and they each hand it to each other until it comes near the mizbech, and there the last kain sprays it on the mizbech. So I see that none of these kainim are moving from their place; they're just handing it over, and that's the halacha, delivering the blood to the mizbech. So it doesn't have to be done by walking by foot. And says the Gemara, Asamnani denayet porta. There as well, each kohen is moving a little bit out of his space for the saveda to be valid. So what is it coming to say here? That one kohen passes to another kohen, if anyways you have to move. That the greatness of the Eibishter, the king, is when you have all the kohenim lined up this way. That's the beauty of the aveda. Toshama, the Gemara tries to bring a eye from another case that says, Kibbel kosher. If the kohen that's kosher receives the blood, what does he do with this? Then what happened is v'nosn lo pasel. He gave it to another kayin which is pasel. What should the kayin that's pasel do? Yachzer le kosher. Give it back to the kayin which is kosher. So it sounds like what it's saying is that the kayin that's kosher handed it over to the kayin that's pasel. Right, okay, so the first chiddush we have in this Mishnah is that even though he handed it to someone that's pasel, it will not pasel this carbon, even though the pasel got it in his hands. But nevertheless, what is the next chiddush that it says here? What does the pasal now have to do with it? Return it back. It seems like he has to go back, a step back to the kayin where he was originally. Why is this? If you're going to say that you do not need a hilacha beregel, just handing it over is fine, and it being, the blood being in the hands of the person that's pasal, does not pasal this, so then the Gemara says, let's see in the words of the Gemara, Kivul HaKayim v'nayim yachs lekosher. So what should be the halach over here? The Gemara itself doesn't spell it out, but Rashi over here explains. Instead of it saying over here, the lashon of the Mishnah or the Braisa, it says that what do? Yachzer lekosher. You give it back to the kayin which is kosher. Why are you giving it back? Why are you going backwards? You could just go forward. Let another kayin, or maybe even the same kayin, go to this person that's puzzle on the side that's actually closer to the mizbeach and take it from him there to get it to the mizbeach. And the space in between that you handed it over just by hand and you didn't walk with your feet should be good enough. Why do I have to go back to you and then walk with it? So from here you see that you must walk by foot in order for it to be a hilacha. So the Gemara says, no, we have to amend what it says here. Not that the one that's puzzle should return it, but the one that gave it, the kain that's kosher, that gave it, let him come around to the other side, that's closer to the mizbeach, and take it from the kain that's puzzle. Right? And we will include that part in between, which was just delivered by hand, to be part of the halacha. It does not have to necessarily be done by moving by your feet. There's no raya from this braisa. The Gemara concludes, Itmer, Amar Ola, Amar Rav Yechanan, all is said in the name of Rav Yechanan, Halacha, Shalei Beregel, Lo Yishma Halacha. When you walk and you deliver, but not moving by foot, is not kosher to do a halacha with this, and therefore, the machshava of pigul, when you're not moving your feet, will not passel the carbon at all.